Walt came recommended to us by our brother and sister NMA group over in Richardson, where he spoke there. Kyle, I heard him speak there, and they said he was a blast. Listen, get a hold of him, so I did.
She said it was a hot summer day, and all the kids were playing outside underneath the pine trees, when one of her daughters came up to her and said, "Mama, there's somebody down that road that's watching us." And my mother looked over and down that direction, and sure enough, as she watched, she saw a head slowly peek up over a log and then drop back outside. So she gathered up all the kids, brought them in the house, and then in the safety of that front bedroom window, they watched as this head periodically would slowly peek up and then drop out of sight. Listen carefully. She said one evening, my grandfather was out of town. And so she brought all the children in and laid them down on pallets in her bedroom so they could all sleep together. She got into bed, she laid down. She was reading her scriptures by a coal lamp. They didn't have electricity. And she said she just didn't feel at ease, and so she thought, well, maybe it's time to go to sleep. So she turned off the lamp, and still she was a little uneasy. And so she thought, well, maybe I didn't say my prayers tonight. Maybe that's what it was. So she slipped off the bed, knelt down, said her prayers, got back up in bed, and still she didn't feel at ease. And she said she looked around the room, and it was lit only by the moonlight. And she noticed a man's hand reach around the door facing. And then the full form of a man stepped out into the room. And that man slowly walked across the room until he got by the side of her bed. He also lit up the gang that laid the track into the woods to haul out logs. That's the way they lumbered back in those days. And he said the way I motivated my crew, I've got a picture of him standing there, and a massive big crew of men. He said I would tell them how many tracks they had to lay that day, and as soon as they laid them, we came home. I remember when we first found out his age. My sisters had gotten old enough to study a little history. And as she was studying, my older sister was studying history, she said, "Daddy, you said you were in World War I. He said, "Yes." She said, "World War I was around 1917. He said, "That's right." She said, "How old were you in World War I? He said, "I was 27 years old in World War I. We realized that instead of being in his late 40s, he was in his 60s. Well, my mother, she taught me many lessons also. I remember one summer we went down on vacation, and I came to my mother and I said, "I don't feel good. I just, I don't feel good." She said, "Come here. Let me see what the problem is." She felt in my forehead. Fortunately, I would go to her then, because if it had been home, she would have given me castor oil. Castor oil has absolutely zero medical benefits, I find out 40 years later. But if you were sick, you got castor oil. But we were on vacation, and so I trusted to tell her I was sick. She said, "I know what we can do. We'll take you down to the doctor." And sitting there on my mother's lap, the doctor came in. He was wearing a white smock. He had this instrument around his neck, had a smile on his face. Touched my forehead, took a few readings. He says, I've got just the thing that'll make you feel better. When he came back into the room, I thought it appeared that he had something sharp in his hand. But he said, don't worry, this won't hurt. And then he reached out and he thrust a needle in my bare behind. Now that hurt. That made such an impression on my body and my mind that it was a number of years before I ever let anybody near me again with a needle. Now, I was so paranoid that as a young lad, the first time I went to a dentist, I had 3 fillings. I convinced the dentist at that young age to fill those 3 teeth without giving me any shots. I was convinced that the pain of the drill would be less than the pain of the needle. Let me close with one last story. And I'll share this story with you. It's a story of an incident that happened with my mother. It's that time of the year. It's Christmas time. So this is a Christmas story. We lived in Lubbock, Texas, in about the 5th, I was in the 5th grade. So I was 11 years old. School was breaking for the Christmas vacation. And so I had rushed home. It's a little farming town up there, south of Lubbock where we lived. And I wanted to see all the presents that my mother had gotten for Christmas. Back then, students gave their teachers presents. And so I was waiting there to see all the presents that she had gotten. She came in. She said, go out and empty a couple of boxes out of the car and I'll show you what I got from the students. She brought in a box and set it down, and she slowly picked out each present and described it and the person that had given it to her. And it was gloves. I don't recall all the gifts, but I remember one was a pair of gloves. Little boy that had that, his dad owned a cotton gin there. Scarves, necklaces, all the kind of presents that young children give their teacher. And then she said, I've saved the best for last. And she went out of the room and got her purse and came back in and pulled out of her purse.
As a young boy of 10, I selected as the yardstick, the barometer of my manhood, a contest with the wily and cunning Louisiana squirrel. I stepped out of that field of battle, accompanied by an uncle, a cousin, one squirrel dog, and a .22 rifle. I was successful on that first squirrel hunt. Now, little did I know that it would be another 30 years before I ever killed another squirrel. I had not become a great hunter. I had gone deer hunting many times and never killed a deer. I had gone duck hunting many times and never killed a duck. However, I had been a bit more successful with dove. I went dove hunting one time and killed 16 birds. My hunting buddies were quick to point out that it took me 178 shots.